Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine war and a global geopolitical news update. My goodness, lots is going on, still lots going on, even though it's, a day or so after Christmas. There is no let up for wars, where wars are concerned and where global geopolitics is concerned. I've got an awful lot to get through in this video, and I hope I can do it in a cogent manner, given the amount of festive feasting I've been doing. And I hope it's in the right kind of order. It's been a bit chaotic, so forgive me for my lack of coherence at times, no doubt, during this video. I hope you're all well. Thank you for joining in. I appreciate your support. And as ever, please remember to like, subscribe, and share if you haven't already done so. I'm sure many of you in the live have, but if you haven't subscribed to the channel, it does really help. Make sure you select the all option when the drop-down menu comes, when you press on the bell icon rather than personalize, and that will give you all of the videos, video notifications, and that'll be good, or something. Okay, right, where shall we start? Well, there's an awful lot. In fact, I've just remembered I was looking at some other bits and pieces while I was watching with my family. I've just had to break myself away from that, and we're going to put that on pause. But I was watching with my family the new series of Stranger Things, because they have released new episodes, and that is something that my boys wanted us to do, and that's all rather exciting if you like that kind of thing. We've got a few claims concerning the war in Ukraine from Budanov. Alexei Budanov's come out and said a whole bunch of things, which is quite interesting. I'm just moving them into position. Yeah, so we're gonna start with Kirill Budanov and what he said. So sorry, I'm just stalling for time. Share that one, and let's get on with it. Okay, so we're going to start with, indeed, Mr. Budanov. So the military intelligence head says more people in Putin's circle are telling him to end the war. This is quite an interesting one, and it wouldn't surprise me at all. In fact, I think you've seen a slight change in Putin's approach to negotiations. There have been sort of mentions of him being keener to come to some kind of peace agreement, although, just as many people claiming the exact opposite. Now, there are many voices in Putin's entourage that say, quote, "We need to end the war," and there are even more of them than before, said Budanov. He refused to name names so that he would not affect the course of the negotiations. It absolutely wouldn't be surprising if this is the case, because the Russian economy, I think, is in all sorts of trouble. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in Hits and Losses video, as I often do in that third section every morning. We'll talk more about some of the economic indicators being really problematic for the Russians at the moment. What else do we have? Russia's current goals are full control of Donetsk region, maximum advance in Dnipropetrovsk region, and continued operations in Zaporizhia and Kherson regions, according to Budanov. Again, the 2028 task is essentially Donbass and Zaporizhia regions. And that's why they're going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. They need to get maximal gains, given that they're going to draw a line in the sand as to where the Russians presently are. So whenever they do arrive at a ceasefire and start the negotiations proper, that is, if the further the Russians get, the more territory they're going to get. Essentially, that's how they see it. Do they still have intent? I mean, this is a golden question I always concern myself with, is, what really is Putin's goal? What are his goals? Does he genuinely think that he can militarily take the Donbass? Does he genuinely think he can militarily take the land bridge up to Odessa and include Odessa up to the border? I mean, that's never going to happen. But does he believe it? And then you start wondering, well, what does he know about the war? How much is how much accurate information gets through to Putin. We just heard that 2 commanders in this first direction have been sacked by the Ukrainians for claiming that there were positions that their own soldiers, the Ukrainians, were holding that weren't actually being held, and they'd been vacated several weeks ago. So the Ukrainians trying hard to make sure that misinformation doesn't get through, because garbage in, garbage out. You make bad decisions on the basis of bad information. Well, with Vladimir Putin, how much accurate information does he have at his fingertips? How much of a handle does he have on the war? And this is a question I've been asking since the beginning of the war. I wrote an article pretty much on this right at the beginning of the war. How do I have better information about what's going on in Ukraine than Putin? So Putin decided to attack into Ukraine thinking that his troops would be welcomed with open arms, and they weren't. There's massive resistance from all across Ukraine. How could he get that much wrong? That's your absolute basics. Like, if we invade Ukraine, they will welcome us with open arms. Therefore, it will take us 3 days. They'll want us to take control of their country. They all hate Zelensky. Let's go in, do that. We'll send in Rosgvardia. We'll send in people with parade uniforms. We'll send in people with only 5 days of rationing. We'll send in people with plans that indicate that we're only expecting this to be a 3-day special military operation. And then immediately, that's not the case, and we are accidentally in a war. How does Vladimir Putin, with the FSB at his fingertips, how does he get that so wrong? And the question then is, well, how is he still in that same situation? Does he still have a really poor grasp of reality? I don't know. It's $1 million question, 60 million, 8 billion, whatever dollar question. Right. So Zelensky is at present on the way. I think he's in Canada at the moment, on the way to meet Donald Trump not in the White House. He's going to Florida, I think, to meet him at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, local time. So he's speaking with European leaders, and he's with Mark Carney from Canada today. Lots of people talking about, lots of analysts trying to work out, what Zelensky's game is, whether he is playing a good sort of trick here, or a card trick, or whether this is really high risk given what happened with the ambush by Vance and Trump back in February in the White House. Well, the analyst here says Zelensky calls Russia and America's bluff. President Zelensky has placed the ball firmly in Trump's court on the one hand, and Putin's on the other. Trump swallowed the whole thing, saying of the 20-point plan that it was only okay if Trump, said it was. And in fact, this is the case. So Trump said Ukraine has nothing, quote, has nothing unless I approve it. I mean, he really does think he is this kind of, not kingmaker, but he is the be all and end all in terms of global peace and global politics. And, in some respects he is, right? And that's a true frustration for someone like me that sees him as a moral vacuum, that he's at the center of everything, because he puts himself at the center of anything. And I suppose that's a lesson that bravado does get you so far. It's at least placing him in the middle of all things at the moment. And it's not just bravado, but it's bullying behavior, because if I'm not in the center of all things, then I will punish you. It is pure arrogance, says our reports. Ukraine is not a bargaining chip, and Zelensky is not a subordinate waiting for permission. People need to understand this invasion is not about Trump's ego or deal-making fantasies with Putin. F Trump. And it's interesting, actually. Oh, I don't have it. I should have it. Let me refresh this. There is a letter that's now come out. It's a 2013 letter. Please let that be here. No, right, it's not in my set of stuff there. I'm going to have a look just to the side. There's a 2013 letter that's just come out, or been revealed, whatever, of Trump sending an invitation to Vladimir Putin for an invitation to the Miss Universe pageants in Russia, as he was going to hold it in 2013. Trump, Putin letter. Let's do this. I'm sure I'm going to find it. where are you? I can't find it just at the moment. But anyway, it's this fawning letter that he sent in 2013 of all times to Putin, trying to get him to come to the Miss Universe pageants. And I just thought it's interesting that, you know, you can see him fawning over Putin back in 2013, just a mere few months before Putin decides to invade invade Crimea. So anyway, and the Donbass and Little Green Men and what have you. Right, back to where I was though. So I was reading the analyst here. I didn't have it on the right screen. So the analyst says, so Trump swallowed the whole thing, saying the 20-point peace plan, it was only okay if Trump said it was, and the fact that it's all a game and Putin won't accept anything in the proposal. So Putin shows Trump he isn't interested, and Trump will say it's all unacceptable, even though all of it's entirely reasonable, because both of them want Ukraine to simply surrender. Europe stands with Ukraine, and we all know we have to play this stupid game to cosset Trump, who Trump's ego, I guess. Europe and Ukraine are standing right there together. Trump and Putin have stitched themselves up trying to stitch up Ukraine. Zelensky will make that clear, and he doesn't even have to say a single thing. So we could well get to this position where we've often seen it before, or often talked about it before, where if Ukraine don't give Russia everything that they want completely and completely capitulate, then Russia says no, and Donald Trump then has a go at Ukraine and blames Ukraine for the peace negotiations failing. But of course, to everyone else looking on, and hopefully decent people in Congress, it's absolutely obvious that Zelensky is doing everything he possibly can to say, yeah, we are ready for peace, and we are working constructively towards that. You know, working hand in glove with Witkoff and Kushner, and you know, whenever the White House says jump, you know, they say how high. And if it doesn't work after this, surely, I mean, you can only blame Putin, but it's whether Trump will ever bring himself to blame Putin. And if he then sits squarely on the side of Russia in any eventual outcomes, you know, where do you go from there? What happens after that? There's been a lot of talk recently about these releases of transcripts of conversations between Putin, Condoleezza Rice, and Americans and the Russians going back decades concerning Ukraine. And Kirill Dmitriev says, from the newly released transcripts of Putin and Bush's meeting in 2008, President Putin, okay, now I'd like to repeat what I said to Condi and Gates in Moscow on NATO enlargement. It won't be new to you, and I don't expect a response. I just want to say it out loud. I'd like to emphasize accession to NATO of a country like Ukraine will create for the long term a field of conflict for you and us, long-term confrontation. The president then says why, and then so on and so forth. So lots of people saying, look, you know, it is all about NATO expansionism. As Vincent Artman here says, what's fascinating about this, and I'm sure we'll be getting an essay-long treatment of it in Quincy, is that it actually doesn't really back up the NATO expansion theory at all. First is the obvious point that Western leaders gave Putin what he wanted in 2008. Ukraine was not offered a map to NATO accession and was nowhere near one in 2014 when Russia invaded Ukraine. So when Russia did invade Ukraine, Ukraine's accession to NATO wasn't on the cards, right? And so it's clearly, and the war now, the 2022 iteration onwards, is the 2014 war. There's no different war here. This is the same war, and the reasons for the 2014 invasion are going to be the reasons for this iteration. Elsewhere, Putin asserts that in the end, Ukraine should decide. And then another quote here, what we are against is Ukraine's accession to NATO, but in any case, we should wait until a majority of the population is in favor, then let them accede, not vice versa. Well, that's very interesting, because the latest data that's come out is 70% of the Ukrainian population is in favor of accession to the EU. 60% is in favor of accession to NATO. So, I mean, that is there. Let them decide. Okay, then, Putin, yeah, sure. As we can see, at the time Putin was saying this, the vast majority of Ukrainians opposed joining NATO. Those numbers only began to change when Russia annexed Crimea and invaded Donbass, at which time, remember, Ukraine was not in NATO and had no prospects of joining it. So these attitudes to joining NATO among Ukrainians, 2002 to 2023. Of course, it went right up in 2023. Interesting to see if it's come down or what since then, and which survey we're looking at. Likewise, so again, Western leaders did exactly what Putin asked and kept Ukraine out of NATO. Russia still invaded. Also interesting, however, is that even in 2008, Putin was already questioning the legitimacy of Ukrainian statehood and asserting that it is an artificial state. So this is back in 2008. 17 million Russians live in Ukraine, a third of the population. Ukraine is a very complex state. This is not a nation built on in a natural manner. It's an artificial country created back in Soviet times. I mean, all of that is highly problematic, of course. Likewise, he's promoting the common but rather questionable idea that Ukraine is an irredeemably divided country split along east-west pro and anti-Russian lines. However, this pattern only really emerged around 2004 with the Orange Revolution and was driven primarily by the internal dynamics of Ukrainian politics rather than some broader civilizational fault line in Ukraine. There's another quote here: the country could just split apart. I've always said there's a certain pro-Western part and a certain pro-Russian part. This is back in 2008 again. It is, moreover, a divide that was erased by Russia's 2014 invasion, as demonstrated by its total disappearance in the 2019 elections that Zelensky won. However, there is another interesting nugget to be mined from this. Putin's fear, which he expresses quite plainly here, is that Ukraine will slip from Russia's sphere of influence and cement its status in the Western world, while also mourning the loss of empire. So another quote here from Putin: there can be only one reason for it, and that would be to cement Ukraine's status as in the Western world. There you go. And yeah, another one here. And Russians gave up thousands of square kilometers of territory voluntarily, unheard of. Ukraine, part of Russia for centuries, given away. Kazakhstan, given away. The Caucasus too. Of course, he just wants the old Russian, Soviet Union back together again, the old band back together. The source then continues, interestingly, this closely echoes the arguments made in that now infamous RIA Novosti editorial published a few days after the war, which was hastily withdrawn when it became clear its triumphalism was premature. I'd like to look at that. I'm not aware of this, a RIA Novosti piece there. When what we see in these passages reflects precisely the same mourning over Russia's loss of empire as we saw in Putin's remarks to Bush, along with the same notion that Ukraine is ultimately part of Russia, belongs with Russia, and in 2022 that Ukraine has now been returned. In other words, this is not about NATO expansionism. This is about Putin's legacy, wants to be Peter the Great again, and wants the Soviet Union to return. Furthermore, and in line with Putin's 2008 concern that Ukraine was cementing its status in the West, we see in the RIA Novosti editorial that argument that Russia's victory has forestalled the consolidation of full Western control over Ukraine. This consolidation, which I think is understandable to read as meaning NATO accession, according to the author, would have made Ukraine's return to Russia impossible for obvious reasons. In other words, NATO enlargement was an important issue for Russia, but not in the way that people who flog the NATO expansion myth want us to believe. In fact, they're engaged in a very curious and rather slight inversion. Rather than NATO enlargement constituting a defensive threat to Russia's security interests, it instead posed a threat to Russia's offensive ambitions, namely to dominate Ukraine. So NATO expansionism they're not worried about NATO expansionism from the point of view that NATO will be on their doorstep and blah, blah, blah. It's a kind of zero-sum game approach that with NATO has Ukraine, it means we don't have Ukraine, and we really want Ukraine. We need it to be ours. We want it to be ours. So the NATO expansionism is not like an intrinsic threat; it's an extrinsic loss, or it's not the value of NATO being in Ukraine. It's the value of us not being in Ukraine. Putin even said as much in his speech announcing the commencement of the special military operation after a characteristically long and rambling history lesson. He complained in 2008 that NATO expansion was pulling Ukraine out of Russia's orbit. He then immediately started talking about how the SMO was intended to protect Russian compatriots abroad from genocide in the Donbass, the same argument he deployed in 2008 against Georgia, incidentally. Now, apart from wild conspiracy theories that NATO countries were supporting genocidal Nazis in Ukraine and defending his own annexation of Crimea, which, as we have seen, is, along with the invasion of Donbass itself, almost the sole cause for Ukraine's pro-NATO shift, there is no logical connection between the NATO expansion argument and the reasons that Putin actually gave for starting the war, which, again, in his own words, were to protect compatriots abroad from genocidal Nazis. I mean, honestly, yeah, I want to do a whole video on the NATO expansion argument because it's still so prevalent. This is a central contradiction at the heart of the NATO expansion myth. Putin did not attack Ukraine because of security threats. He attacked Ukraine because he desires to dominate it and sees NATO as a roadblock to that ambition. Even now, he speaks of liberating Russia's historical lands, another callback to previous sentiments mourning Russia's loss of empire after 1991. Such ideas, which have been seen, are not new, do not fit neatly with the NATO expansion myth. The myth's proponents, therefore, simply ignore them, just as they ignored the RAA Novosti editorial, which, as we can now see, largely echo Putin's own words to Bush in 2008. Instead, they will point to the sentence where Putin says NATO bad as proof that NATO was the cause. Rarely, though, do they acknowledge the broader context of Russian imperial revanchism and Putin's and the Russian foreign policy establishment's steadfast denial of Ukraine's legitimacy as a state outside of its relationship with Russia. This is, of course, a nakedly imperialist mindset, which we expect from people like Kirill Dmitriev, that such views which effectively shift the blame for a genocidal invasion away from the actual aggressor, find adherents at shops like the Quincy Institute is more puzzling. So, yeah, it is this kind of shifting of blame from the aggressor to not quite the victim, but to something else, to NATO. It's NATO's fault that Russia invaded Ukraine. Of course, that should be really offensive to anyone with a firm grasp of reality, but who knows? Now, it's interesting that people like Jeffrey Sachs, the economist, who is a political realist like John Mearsheimer, he is now just appearing on Solovyov's show and just going to Russia all the time to spread his nonsense. Absolutely outrageous. Okay, this looks like a Politico piece. The US side sees it as a major step forward that Zelensky is willing to hold a referendum and is no longer ruling out territorial concessions. But as Zelensky emphasized during a phone interview with Axios, holding such a plebiscite would have major political, logistical, and security complications. This is the idea that he needs to take back to his population, because some of this is unconstitutional, that, you know, we need elections during wartime, that this might happen, that might happen. What do you think about this, you know, concerning the peace negotiation points? It continues, that's why he thinks a 60-day ceasefire to arrange hold the vote is the minimum. A senior US official told Axios the Russians understand the need for a ceasefire if Zelensky calls a referendum, but want a shorter timetable. Zelensky also said it's not clear to him whether Russia is prepared to agree to Trump's plan in the first place. I have some intelligence, but I'm at the moment when I want to believe only to the words of leaders. That's a bit confused. But essentially, there's this big argument as to whether they had a 60-day ceasefire. It's been talked about recently in order to arrange and hold an election in wartime. Now, Michael Weiss, the journalist, says Zelensky has turned the painful question of territorial concessions into a joint challenge for Trump and Putin. He has deferred responsibility for whatever happens to the Ukrainian people, the better to keep his legacy from being tarnished by forfeiture of national sovereignty. So if he can't give this stuff up himself, like he can't give up both his own rulership, but also he can't give up the Donbass without the Ukrainian people giving him permission. Trump would have to guarantee the security of holding a national referendum, and it's unclear whether Ukrainians in the occupied territories would get a vote or how they might vote under foreign coercion. Putin would have to accept a 60-day ceasefire, twice as long as the one on offer by the US and Ukraine in May, which Putin rejected. Comparing a referendum on giving up Donetsk to Brexit is cheeky, so he must have done that. 75% of Ukrainians rejected the proposal as of December the 15th, according to the Kyiv International Institute of Sociology. And so to change their minds, the US would really have to incentivize them. In short, Zelensky is calling America and Russia's bluff. This is kind of what the analysts were saying, and doing it with a handshake and a smile and an invitation to Trump to come to Kyiv. So he's offered Trump to Kyiv. He's saying, if you want us to have an election, that's cool. We'll have that, but we need a 60-day ceasefire to have that. And then that's obviously what we're going to need to hold an election, to which, the US and Putin would have to say yes, and the US would have to provide significant security guarantees, which then puts Trump into a bind. Because on the one hand, he's saying, you guys need to have an election. You're a dictator, like he said previously to Zelensky. So Zelensky goes, okay, I'm not a dictator. I will hold an election, but it has to be done under really strict controls to ensure the safety of all these people, not least the soldiers who are going to need to vote. And so that then puts Trump in a bit of a bind here. And of course, if Russia don't allow a ceasefire to take place that's significant enough to allow for an election, then it makes Russia look like they are not wanting democracy to exist in Ukraine, and it paints them in a bad light. So quite an interesting move there, arguably, from Zelensky that could be pretty clever of him. Right. Okay. Now, I said to you, I think this morning, that Trump spoke recently to Andrej Babiš, the new Prime Minister of Czechia, who is pretty supportive of Russia, not supportive of Ukraine. And that was a bad European leader to be talking to. But it doesn't surprise me at all. Trump, it's just, he hangs out with the wrong people and he talks to the wrong people. He'd much rather get his opinion of the war from Viktor Orban than from Emmanuel Macron. So speaking to Babiš is a bad call. And no doubt Babiš would have poisoned Trump against the rest of Europe. The Czech government is going to be somewhat Eurosceptic now, and more aligned to Hungary than to Europe and to Ukraine. At the same time, he just spoke to Nawrocki, the Polish president, who comes from almost that same worldview, sort of right-wing populist, but completely different position on Russia. And Nawrocki is a bit of a Trump whisperer, arguably. He was offered to the White House before he was elected president, because the Americans wanted him to be the president, because he's a kind of MAGA type person. But he's a MAGA type person who hates the Soviet Union. And I mean the Soviet Union as of old. He hates the Nazis in Germany. He's like a historian, amateur boxer, this right-wing populist who, not that being an amateur boxer means anything in context here, but it's really important, I think, that Nawrocki was on the phone to Trump recently and hopefully setting the record straight with regard to what Babiš might have said. Anyway, the Czechs have all wrapped up in this Russian disinformation, voted in a pro-Russian kleptocrat, says Jay in Kyiv, and now they've got control of the government. They're aiming to stop helping Ukraine. Czechs lived under brutal Russian occupation for 45 years, but those that remember are mostly gone. So this is a very disturbing development. So that you've got the SPD, you've got the motorists, and you've got what are the three coalition parties? And they're all So the Czech Ministry of Defense has been tasked with preparing documents to end its participation in the ammunition initiative to aid Ukraine. SPD chairman Tomio Okamura announced that Okamura he's a guy that took down Ukrainian flags. He is not a friend of Ukraine, adding the government will not provide any money to continue the war. Quote, the Ministry of Defense will prepare the documents for the government's decision-making in the termination of the role of the so-called ammunition initiative, said Okamura. According to him, the documents will be discussed by the Coalition Council and subsequently by the government. He added that they are proceeding according to the program statement. Defense Minister Jaromír Zuna for the SPD said at a press conference on Friday that the fate of the Czech ammunition initiative will be decided by the government as a whole. According to him, however, no one questions it in principle, but the issue is in the process of its management, how will be and how to proceed. Now, this chap, Jaromir Juna, has not been allowed to go to Ukraine. So the government is disallowing their defense minister from speaking effectively to the Ukrainians. The Czech government, it appears, have gone in the wrong direction. And it is a really, really problematic situation, I would argue. Is this someone making reference to the fact I was wearing an Oilers jersey this morning that I got from Michael Vuchar, by the way? So Michael Vuchar is here saying he's a Canadian that's sent me some lovely Canadian stash. Meeting with Carney today. I don't know. I know you're being a bit hard on Carney. I think, yeah. So Edmonton is full of Ukrainians. The Oilers are Ukraine's team, and I was wearing an Oilers jersey this morning. So there you go. Anyway, thanks for being on board, guys. Right. A Hungarian investigation into a network of fake online profiles reportedly run by the Russian-backed Orban regime for developing artificial online consensus of support for the ruling party. You are starting to see, says Stratcom Center, a fake pro-Russian Fidesz party, pro-Viktor Orban profiles, fake online profiles popping up. Hundreds of well-developed personal accounts with AI-generated lives, posting about family, football, politics, and love of the ruling regime. Right, this is where, and we're going to be talking about this in a little while, right? So here you've got reports that Hungary have a number of very well-developed fake profiles. So we're taking on the kind of idea of having bots that are just these quite one-dimensional online profiles that are liking and reposting egregious stuff that's either real or not real. It doesn't really matter, but just amplifying the voice of amplifying the narratives that align with Russia, or in this case Orban, or whatever. This is why there needs to be this is what the EU was saying to X, and this is why X has been fined, and this is why there's a battle between the United States and Europe at the moment. This is one of the most significant things happening in world politics right now, is that much of the United States, in the certain political areas, I say much of the United States, there are many good American viewers watching this saying, well, that's not me at all. But there are so very many other people in the Trump administration and elsewhere that are attacking Europe at the moment. They're seeing Europe as the enemy. And we're going to talk about this more formally in a while. But it comes down to the EU trying to regulate big tech, and the US government saying, we don't like you regulating big tech because they lobby us and pay us lots of money, and they're our mates. And look at all the people who contributed to the inauguration. Oh, it turns out it's all the big tech that you're talking about. And so the big tech have Trump in his, Trump is not a puppeteer. Trump is a puppet. He is manipulated by all these people pulling his strings. Peter Thiel through JD Vance, the Heritage Foundation through most of the White House staff, and big tech just directly, Elon Musk, so on and so forth, David Sachs. Then you got Jeff Bezos, Mark Andreessen, Sam Altman, all these people, Tim Cook from Apple. They are all able to shape really American foreign policy. And this is to give big tech permission to do all sorts of things that actually most people are not in favor of. Like most people, if you ask them, would you like Twitter, for example, whether you're on Twitter or not, would you think it would be a good idea for X to have much more transparency so that we knew whether people commenting on there were real human beings or not? Because at the moment, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to tell whether people are real humans or not because of the amazing capabilities of AI. And most people would say, we would like to know whether someone we're talking with is real or a bot. Okay, well, how about you allow some transparency with regard to the blue tick verification mechanism, which isn't verification anymore? How about you allow us to see behind the bonnet a little bit? And, as we have regulation elsewhere, and X says, no, was like, well, then you are just allowing there to be disinformation spread right throughout Twitter. And this is dangerous to our democracies. It's dangerous to the users. Elon Musk does absolutely nothing to stop bots and trolls from manipulating his platform, and therefore for manipulating its users, and therefore for manipulating me and you. It is absolutely egregious that this is happening. Right. So speaking of, pro-Russian entities. Oh, look, the AfD has now been accused of providing sensitive defense information directly to the Kremlin. So here's a newspaper headline: Germany's far-right AfD accused of gathering information for the Kremlin. Alternative for Germany, Alternative for Deutschland, AfD. Opponents accuse the party of attempting to disclose sensitive information on arms, supply routes, and drone defenses. When you look at some of their information requests that they put to the government, it only makes sense if the information is being requested because Russia want that information. What with Putin, says Alex Taylor, Trump and co, and our own homegrown populists all more and more on the same side, that would be the cue for the remains of the rest of us to get our act together. This is very, very worrying. There are more stories on this. I suggest you go and check them out. An AfD lawmaker filed 8 counter-drone inquiries in one day, plus questions about Western arms routes through Thuringia. Interior Minister calls it a Kremlin task list. The debate isn't just intent, it's the mosaic effect of granular details, says the Euromaidan Press with its article, AfD lawmaker files 8 drone defense inquiries in one day. It's a Kremlin task list. Demands of details on police capabilities, Western arms routes through Thuringia, which is an AfD stronghold. The AfD is doing the bidding of the Kremlin. It seems to be perfectly evident to me. Okay, so moving on. I'm not going to go into that one yet. So let's move on to here. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni tells staff, quote, next year will be much worse at Christmas meeting. This is, as far as I understand this is her like, God, do you think this year's bad? You just wait till next year. I've been chatting with my intelligence guys. It's going to go batshit crazy. That's probably not a good, not a happy Christmas message, put it that way. So, government prepares a final 2025 cabinet session to vote on extending arms sales authorization to Ukraine, despite Northern League attempts to impose restrictions. Northern League is probably part of La Liga. I would have thought you've got a coalition of parties in control in Italy, and La Liga are not fans of Ukraine, shall we say. So depressing, isn't it? Okay, so as a segue into returning to this idea that the United States is waging political war on Europe, I'm going to start with JD Vance. JD Vance came out and said, apparently to Sohrab Ahmari the other day, that, quote, France and Britain have nuclear weapons if they allow themselves to be overwhelmed with destructive moral ideas. And what he means there is immigrants, basically. If there are too many immigrants in France and Britain, particularly Islamic immigrants, if they allow themselves to be overwhelmed with destructive moral ideas, then you allow nuclear weapons to fall into the hands of people who can actually cause very, very serious harm to the US, JD Vance said. So JD Vance, and lots of people have just pointed this out. I find it very odd, says Mike Cote, that JD Vance is more concerned about the possibility of French and British nukes falling into the wrong hands than he is about Russian and Chinese nukes currently being in the wrong hands, being in enemy hands. So he's all about being nice to Russia and allowing China to do this and buying our NVIDIA chips. You can have our H100 chips or whatever it is. Yeah, you can have these. Yep. Oh, you've got nukes. Don't worry about that. Don't worry. Oh, Britain and France, though. Those evil British and French. That's why he comes over to the Munich Security Conference and starts banging on about the enemy of everybody is actually just Europe, essentially. And it's, oh my goodness, it's so destructive at the moment. Jake Bro had a segment on this, in fact, taking that same tweet by the looks of it, and talking very candidly about, what's going on here. In fact, I might bring you to the
analysts predict that a Muslim majority in Russia is possible within the next 30 years.
Okay, so
So why is JD Vance so scared of 6% in the UK, but 15% in Russia and growing? If a Muslim majority government in Russia took over, they'd have 6,000 nuclear weapons. You can refute these people with facts, but it doesn't matter. They just roll right off them. I have a counter argument to everyone and everything, but they're just going to ignore it. They're just going to keep spewing their hatred and bullshit to push their fascist agenda to seize more power and control for themselves. Resist this. This is what JD Vance said to.
Okay, so there's been a bit of a fact check here when JD Vance has come out and said, look, I'm worried about, the growth of Islamic fundamentalism in the UK and France. And then people have fact checked him and said, hang on, have you seen the number of the growth of Islam in Russia, given, you've got Chechnya, Dagestan, and all these places, is much higher than these places than France and UK. So how do you square that one? Anyway, so JD Vance at the moment, I mean, is I don't know, how do I describe JD Vance? He's a threat, I think, to democracy for a start. But I just want to remind you of this interview snippet from March, I think, earlier this year. And this is our segue from nukes, is the idea we're eventually going to end up at the US versus Europe, but we're going to go from nukes through Greenland to get to US versus Europe.
Denmark, which controls Greenland, it's not doing its job and it's not being a good ally. So you have to ask yourself, how are we going to solve that problem, solve our own national security? If that means that we need to take more territorial interest in Greenland, that is what President Trump is going to do, because he doesn't care about what the Europeans scream at us. He cares about putting the interests of America's citizens first. Denmark.
So he's whinging about Europeans screaming at us. It's really, I mean, do you remember at the time, it was really pretty distasteful what he said there. And then we've got this, and it could be to do with Epstein, the Epstein files, and Trump thinking, what can I do to distract people? So he's announcing stuff like, there are going to be these Trump destroyers, the biggest naval ships ever. I'm going to call it the Golden Fleet, and they're going to be named after me. And he's doing all these really big ostentatious things that look like just big distractions. And he's doing a bit of this, doing a bit of that. But you're wondering, making moves on Greenland again, is that to distract away from Epstein files? Sending tomahawks into Nigeria. You're supposed to be the president of peace, this kind of big peacemaking dude, right? And you appear to be not bothered really about peace. So here, the Premier of Greenland made a statement. When was this? December the 23rd. So this is the Premier of Greenland. This morning, I'm both saddened and grateful. Saddened because during a press conference last night, the President of the United States once again expressed the desire to take over Greenland. With such statements, our country is reduced to a question of security and power. That is not how we see ourselves, and it's not how Greenland can or should be spoken about. We are a people with a long history, a strong culture, and a vibrant democracy. We are a country with a responsibility for our own territory and for our own future. Our territorial integrity and our right to self-determination are firmly anchored in international law and cannot simply be ignored. That is also why I am grateful. Thank you to everyone here at home for the clear support and unity that has been shown, the calmness and dignity with which you have met this situation. Send a strong signal to a people who stand firm in their values and in their responsibility. I would also like to thank heads of government and partners around the world who have clearly and unequivocally expressed their respect for Greenland, for our democratic institutions, and for the fundamental principles of international law. That support confirms that we here at home do not stand alone. Once again, Greenland is our country. Decisions are made here, and I will at all times fight for our freedom and our right to decide for ourselves and to shape our own future. For now, I hope that the peace of Christmas can settle over us all. Merry Christmas. And yeah, just wow, why is this turning up again? Here we have a snippet from Fox News from the other day.
I guess my main question to you is, what argument will you make to the Danes, who seem to be totally opposed to letting the U.S. come into a territory that they've had autonomous control of going back hundreds of years? What was the case that you'll make to them?
And I think this is the new envoy that has been appointed to Greenland, envoy Governor Jeff Landry.
Well, I think our discussion should be with the actual people in Greenland, the Greenlanders. What are they looking for? What opportunities have they not gotten? Why haven't they gotten the protection that they actually deserve? Look, the United
What do you mean, why haven't they got the protection? What protection don't they have?
States has always been a welcoming party. We don't go in there trying to conquer anybody, trying to, take over anybody's country. We
Really?
say, listen, we represent liberty. We represent economic strength. We represent protection. Look, no one knows that better than Louisiana. My family has been in Louisiana for over 300 years. We've lived under more flags than anyone living in the continental United States over the history of America. We ended up settling under the United States of America's flag. And for that, Louisiana has been so much better. The country has been so much better. But again, that's a discussion for us to have with the Greenlanders.
Well,
so it seems less a discussion, more of a threat. This is that same man.
300 years. And we have lived under more flags than anyone living in the continental United States. But guess what? The flag that we ended up with is the greatest flag, right, Winston? And that's the United States of America, because that's the flag that stands for liberty, opportunity, and security. And it's done well for us. And all we're going to do is go have us a great conversation with those folks in Greenland. They're in the Western Hemisphere, fits inside the Monroe Doctrine. And we're going to bring them some great Cajun food.
I'm sure the Greenlanders are going to be really excited to have some, I don't know, Cajun chicken from Louisiana. That'll make it all worthwhile, right? He says wearing military fatigue tops of some variety, and wow, just talking about the Monroe Doctrine. In other words, we're going to take control over the Western Hemisphere. You guys worry about Europe. But oh, by the way, Greenland is no longer part of Europe. It is now ours. It's part of the Monroe Doctrine. Absolutely incredible. Just wow. And yet, so you've got this very strong, and I've talked about the tension here between this isolationist approach and an expansionist approach. So on the one hand, Trump or the White House seems to want to isolate away from alliances, away from cooperating with the rest of the world. But on the other hand, they want to expand to take control over places like Greenland, Panama, Canada. They've got this kind of want to stick our flag in these places, and we want to expand, but also retreat behind the walls. We'll expand our country, but we'll keep up these walls so we don't have to have economic cooperation and alliances and whatnot. And there's a definite tension that exists there, but there's just, I think, probably tension exists within the Trump administration, within the Republican Party, where you have a lot of old school Republicans who are not big fans of this. And you've got actual just downright chaos as well, diplomatically speaking, by which I mean here, well, as an example, Stephen Pfeiffer says the Trump administration decision to recall 30 ambassadors, so the mass recall of US ambassadors leaves an unprecedented set of global vacancies. Recall 30 ambassadors will leave 110 US embassies without ambassadors in place. Please explain, Secretary Rubio, how that strengthens US ability to promote its security and economic interests. And you could argue that actually this is part of the, well, we're not really bothered about talking with other nations in a friendly fashion. We're just going to do our diplomacy through bullying. Although your man here says, hey, we're just going to have a friendly conversation with the Greenlanders, but essentially it's part of the Monroe Doctrine, and we're going to have control of you. And we'll have control of places, and if we don't, we're just going to recall our ambassadors from around the world. That's that kind of isolationism and territorial expansionism. It's just this weird tension that exists. Okay, then as we move on towards the idea of Europe against the US, or the US against Europe, here we've got Derek Taylor saying the Romanian Senate passed a bill that sanctions doctors who publicly spread false information or claims that contradict established scientific evidence and could endanger public health, with penalties ranging up to a permanent ban from practicing the medical profession. Wow. So they're getting hard on disinformation there, which is something that I don't think we see very much from big tech in the United States. I say United States, all big tech companies generally are American companies. And so, you know, when we talk about needed regulation of big tech, it's necessarily about American companies. And that's why many Americans have said that the EU regulation against big tech is an attack on the US, even though, as I told you time and time again, that's just by default that they're American companies. This is not an attack on big tech. This is needed regulation for big tech, who is too powerful. And at the moment, there's only the EU that's standing up to big tech, apart from Russia and China that stand up to big tech by banning it. But the US says nothing about that. It's just absolutely outrageous. Anyway, let's listen to our friend Tucker Carlson here speak in fairly outrageous terms. Give me a second.
My main instinct is that the lesson of World War II for some people was white Christian countries are a threat to the world.
100%. Post-war consensus, yes.
And that's just not a fact,
Yeah.
actually, at all. It's why they hate Russia.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be the only majority white Christian country in the world soon. And they hate it. That is why they hate it, by the way. Let's just stop lying about it. That's why they hate it. My main instinct.
So the reason that people hate Russia, the reason that I am dead against Russia, is because it's going to be the only majority white Christian country in the world soon. So you guys out there that watch my channel because you're absolutely enraged by the war in Ukraine, the invasion of the Russians into Ukraine. The real reason we don't like Russia is because we've thought, well, they're going to be the only majority non-white, only majority white Christian country in the world soon. That's what really annoys us. What? And this goes back to the point that was made earlier. Russia, by Jake Bro, Russia is Europe's fastest growing Muslim population, currently at 19% and estimated to be at 30 to 50% at 2050. Europe's current 6.8% Muslim population is to reach 10.2 at medium immigration in 2050. That is higher than current immigration levels. Christians estimated to reach 65.2%. So Tucker Carlson is talking absolute bollocks here, right? Absolute unadulterated bollocks. He's lying, but this is all part of like, oh, how wonderful Russia is. It's this Christian, ethno-Christian, ethno-nationalist state that we should be supporting because they are the only majority white Christian country in the world, or they will be soon. And all of us, we're going down a pan. It's like, stats are that actually Russia, but on your metrics, Russia would be going down a pan faster than anyone around here. Thank you very much. It's just lies. But for some reason, like Russia, it really appeals to people who sit on the right, on the kind of nationalistic right, and just trying to work that out. Here's another example. You've got George Santos, who's been pardoned by Trump, freshly out of prison. Congressman George Santos is, of course, in where? Where is he now? Oh, Moscow. Of course he is. Russia's purchasing the entire GOP, says Jane Kiev. Promoting Russian nonsense on the X platform for cash is becoming mainstream. And we're going to talk a little bit about reform a bit later because I was challenged by someone concerning reform. Here are Nigel Farage and Donald Trump Jr. with Andrew Tate and Tate parroting Russian propaganda. And lastly, there's Andrew Tate, George Galloway, and Trump Jr. All of those. There is a real tie up between Russia, the far right, and sexual predators, says this person. But actually, just what is it about the far right and Russia? What is the attraction there? It's so funny that Russia always bang on about Ukrainians being Nazis when there's more evidence of that within Russia and the ultra-nationalist movements there than in Ukraine. So then that gets us on to talking about this fracas between the United States and Europe, or the EU, where the EU has been trying to regulate and tax big tech appropriately to protect consumers and voters in citizens in the EU, and big tech's gone absolutely mental. The US has responded by sanctioning 5 European individuals, including Thierry Breton, you know, former, what was it, head of the European Commission. So, or he was a former guy in charge of the finances, I think, was he not? Anyway, Kirill Dmitriev comes out and says, not a coincidence, all 5 egregious Europeans sanctioned by the US for censorship were also obsessed with fighting Russian disinformation. So you're seeing this ecosystem of people. That's kind of where I was just going with the previous post. You've got this ecosystem of people who exist in the Russian world, the Russian sphere of influence, whether it's Tucker Carlson or Donald Trump Jr. even, or JD Vance, or so on and so forth. And it's wrapped up with kind of big tech, Elon Musk, David Sachs. These people, David Sachs, as the crypto guy, effectively, the South African brodergarch, crypto guy for the White House, or adjacent to the White House, Elon Musk, the South African Tesla and X and SpaceX and blah, blah, blah. And you got Peter Thiel as well. With Palantir and whatever, another big South African tech brodergarch. But yet David Sachs can't stop saying things in support of Russia at the moment. What is this connection between the big tech, the right-wing populism in the United States, ethno-nationalism, nationalism, and support for Russia? This is super worrying. And of course, Kirill Dmitriev, he's a clever, canny operator. He's like, yeah, absolutely, 5 egregious Europeans sanctioned by the US for censorship. They were also obsessed with fighting Russian disinformation. Yeah, we should all be obsessed with fighting Russian disinformation, sunshine. It's a threat to us all. And isn't it funny that 5 people that have been sanctioned by the US have been involved in, like Kirill Dmitriev's nailed it, by the way. What's the US gone and done? They've sanctioned people who have campaigned against Russian disinformation. It's like they're trying to benefit Russia at every conceivable opportunity. Building an anti-Russian censorship network, globalist deep state EU bureaucrats attack traditional values and therefore Russia. So Russia is somehow responsible for upholding traditional values. But when you actually go and look at the data, like church attendance and moral behavior in Russia, it's way worse than anywhere in Europe and way worse than the United States even, and whatnot. And so it's just really irritates me. Sean Pinner says, Kirill Dmitriev has to use a VPN to tweet that from Russia because the platform is banned there. And then he blocks me from replying in case people believe what I'm saying. That's Russia personified in one account. Yeah, absolutely. So what do we have? AI boom adds more than $500 billion of wealth to of US tax barons in 2025. So we need to understand the larger context of what's going on with the attempt to sanction, well, not the attempt, the sanctioning of these 5 European individuals. And Trump claiming, hey, look, we're doing really well. Look at the stock market. It's up, even though the stock market's actually underperformed against even European and other competitors or comparable countries. But, you know, there's an awful lot of money that's been made and GDP is looking really good. But you're wondering how much of that is to do with AI. There's a big AI boom. And these guys are lobbying the hell out of the American government. You've got these huge tech barons, like Elon Musk's net worth has increased by nearly 50% to $645 billion, with founders of Google and Amazon also seeing huge wealth gains. And what you're seeing here is that this then translates into GDP. I think I've got something on this later that I was going to talk about later, but I don't know that later will come about because I'm never going to get to, I've already been banging on an hour. But let me just find what I was going to talk about concerning GDP. Where have I got it? Just we need to be very aware of what's going on with sort of GDP and tech. Oh, I might have it back here. Yes, here it is. Okay, good. Right. So, no, not this one. The next one. This one. So this is why the person who invented GDP said it's a terrible measure in terms of measuring wealth of nations. The US just charge each other more for services and call it wealth, hence its debt and deficits. Meanwhile, Europeans have all they need and more to live. So here we've got US GDP goes up, highest among major developed nations, and everyone at the moment is so you've got basically what's happened. You've got this pitch battle. Sorry, it's not up there. Sorry, I had the wrong one. You've got this pitch battle going on online. This is quite an online thing. But as soon as these 5 Europeans were sanctioned, because, well, it first started with Elon Musk and X getting fined 140 million euros. Then Musk and the US went to war with Europe. And then 5 Europeans were sanctioned. And now the Americans are saying, oh, you guys suck. Oh, my God, it's terrible to live in Europe. Europe's horrible. Oh, my God, how horrible it is. You guys don't have, your GDP is much better than yours, blah, 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 blah. And coming out with all these metrics, attacking Europe and saying, well, we're much better than you because look at this. And then other people going, hang on, well, in GDP, if you're talking about GDP, then how? So, for example, you know, you don't have a nationalized health service, right, in the US. How are GDP calculations skewed by including private health transactions in the US? So the inclusion of private health transactions in GDP calculations can skew the results in the US due to the significant private spending on healthcare. So this spending is not only a part of the GDP, but also contributes to the overall economic growth. However, the private sector's role in healthcare spending can lead to a more inflated GDP figure, as it may not fully reflect the actual economic impact of healthcare services provided. This private sector's involvement in healthcare can lead to a more optimistic GDP figure, as it includes a wide range of services and providers. However, this can also result in a misleading perception of healthcare's contribution to economic growth. It is essential to consider both public and private spending when analysing the relationship between healthcare and the GDP to get a more accurate picture of the healthcare's role in the economy. And I talked about this some time ago because I think the UK is going to try and have more public spending reflected in GDP, because we spend money on, say, healthcare, and in the US, although they spend an absolute ton, in fact, they spend more per capita on healthcare from a governmental point of view, they spend an absolute ton privately, right? And that's all included in GDP, but it's not included, I don't think, for us. And so there's a skewing there. There are also other kind of skews as well. So US average is 1,800 hours plus. So in the US, they work longer hours, which means, okay, great, you've got a GDP that's higher than ours, but you guys work more hours than us. We have more holiday time, we have more paid holiday time, and we have just more time. So you might be GDP rich, if you like, but we are time rich. Work more, live less. Limited paid leave, so we have paid holidays, bank holidays and all sorts. European average annual hours is 1,500 to 1,600, so we're a couple hundred hours shorter than the Americans, significantly working fewer hours. We have generous paid leave, 4 to 6 weeks. So the Americans have less free time and shorter lives. So then we look at like the healthcare. Healthcare is better in across the board in Europe. It's good if you've got money in the US and if you're really well insured, but you know, further down that spectrum, not so good. So they have shorter life expectancy. We have a greater life expectancy of 82 plus years. There's a 78 years, lower across all wealth cycles. Ours is higher and improving, higher disposable income as well. I watch an awful lot of videos on Americans that come to the UK and the difference between the US and UK. And I'm quite amazed at actually how expensive things are in the US. I thought things would be more expensive in the UK. It's a whole host of things that are much cheaper in the UK. And then we have things like free museums, free this, free that, and all sorts. So despite higher income per capita, so if you average it out per person, the Americans have higher income per capita, but actually a lot of that is focused in the top couple of percent. That's why they always talk about the other 98%. Top 2% do very well, thank you very much. Everyone else less so, and that skews a mean average, right? Despite higher income per capita, Americans are relatively poorer due to sacrificing more free time and experiencing shorter, less healthy lives compared to Europeans. True wealth includes time and health. Okay, that's a bit of a sidebar. Then go back to here so the AI boom has added an absolute load of money, but some people are saying that actually, you know, Sam Altman, OpenAI, Oracle are paying OpenAI are paying, and then it comes back around to Oracle, and it's just a circle of money, and actually as arguable as to how much extra is being generated, how much kind of service and productivity is being generated here. But also there's a big worry about, and I don't know if I've got that here as well. real worry about AI's impact on productivity going forward. I don't know if I have that in this particular. I'm just sorry. I've got so many different tab groups. Right, here it is. Okay, yeah, I've got this at another tab group. Okay, so this is from Shanaka Anselm Pereira. He says the economy isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed. You were told GDP growth equals prosperity. Here's the 2025 reality, 4.3% GDP growth. So the Trump administration at the moment is really singing the praises of how their GDP growth is looking really good. So therefore the Trump economics are working. $166 billion in corporate profits, 4.6% unemployment, 0% real income growth. The economy grew, but you didn't. This isn't a bug, it's a feature. The 20th century ran on a deal. Your labor equals their profit, your paycheck equals your paycheck. That deal is over. Productivity now roots around workers. AI handles the tasks, shareholders collect the gains, you compete for what's left. KPMG's chief economist on this data, quote, I've never seen anything like it. 40% of employers are planning AI workforce cuts. Entry-level hiring in AI-exposed jobs down 13%. The Fed is cutting rates into a boom. Why? Because they know what the headline won't tell you. The jobs aren't coming back. The growth doesn't need you. The system isn't broken. It's evolved past you. By 2027, jobless growth won't be an anomaly. It'll be the model. The golden age is real. It's just not yours. In other words, this is an age for big tech, big companies and AI making an absolute ton of money. And so the economy is growing, but jobs are, people are losing jobs. Okay, right. Okay, so this is a little bit more subtle. And then that power is getting focused into big tech, and then big tech is lobbying the American government to then go to Europe and call us the enemy. Not Russia, not China. We're the enemy now. To the point where we've got people like Liz Truss, the former lettuce-faced bloody Prime Minister of the UK, who lasted about as long as the letters, just absolutely being up for Donald Trump for suing the BBC and America ruining the UK. Like, she seems to be up for that. So let's go to Liz Truss, who's all over the place at the moment, being an absolute wingnut.
Are parts of the British establishment that have been censoring free speech
Shut
going to
up.
be held to account?
Shut up.
There have been many public calls
How's
for
that
my
censorship?
office to use its sanctions authority to this end. And all I can say is that if there were sanctions, it would not be my prerogative to fine-tune them, execute them, and announce them. It would be that of Secretary Rubio. And everyone should watch closely Secretary Rubio's Twitter feed and our press office for more on this issue.
So we may see something fairly soon, holding people to account.
It's the holidays, a lot's going on, but I can tell you that, the rhetoric that you see from me and other Americans, it does not exist in a vacuum. Like, this is a real concern.
Our part.
Translating that is, she is encouraging someone that works in the State Department who's talking about there are going to be way more sanctions. Just watch this space. Marco Rubio, watch his Twitter feed, because that's how we do diplomacy, right? Via Twitter. She says, watch his space. And Liz Truss couldn't be happier. Yeah, let's go for it, because she's part of that information space. If you gave her half the chance, she'd be slagging off Ukraine, 100%. So one of the people that was targeted by these sanctions on Europe was this guy called Imran Ahmed. And I didn't realize, I just saw his name. I was like, oh, I don't really know this guy. I do know this guy. He was absolutely brilliant. And I played you a clip of him speaking on Newsnight some time ago. In fact, I wonder if I can find it now just for you, just to remind you what this guy is like. And he was absolutely brilliant on Newsnight in talking about the tech industry and whatnot. Yeah, here he is. So if I can find this for you. So this was him. I'm sure this is one I was thinking about.
TikTok. We opened accounts as 13-year-old girls in 4 different countries, and we looked at what TikTok serves in the first half hour. within 2.6 minutes self-harm content, within 8 minutes eating disorder contents. Camilla, we named half the account something like Susan. We named the other half something like Susan lose weight. The algorithm recognized that that was a vulnerable person, and they got served 12 times as much self-harm content in the first 30 minutes after opening an account. Now, that is outrageous. If anyone came up to a child and said to them, you know what, you're too fat, a 15-year-old child, and said, you're too fat, you should go on a 500 calorie a day diet. You see how free that speech would be. These platforms do it to thousands of kids, hundreds of thousands of kids, thousands and thousands of times. And
so that was, and funny enough, that wasn't the one I was talking about, right? It was actually one that was more recent than that, but that is to do with TikTok, and you know, it's in that sort of tech context that this guy exists. He wants to have sensible regulation of the tech industry. This was the one that I was referring to. I think it was more this one.
In control of what he's saying. And sometimes when you're trying to sort of, asking like, what do you think about what Elon Musk says? You're thinking, crumbs, I don't think I know. I'm not sure he does either.
Are we overstating the influence of him then?
I think Elon Musk, his influence comes not necessarily just from his voice, but his ability to control the algorithm on a platform that, like it or not, is used by journalists, politicians, and many others, and is the site of quite a lot of crucial democratic discourse. Now, I think it's worrying that it's the site of so much discourse, and that the algorithms that shape what wins and what loses on that site, because, there's a couple of 100 million people that post there. It's one of the smaller sites, but nevertheless, the algorithm decides who gets visibility and who gets suppressed, essentially. And he now has his thumb on the scales. I think this is
So that's Imran Ahmed, and he's absolutely on point. Like, if you listen to him, this guy knows what he's talking about. He seems like a decent human being. He's the guy that has just been sanctioned by the United States of America. So UK campaigner targeted by Trump accuses tech giants after he was sanctioned. He says this is just sociopathic greed. US companies are corrupting the system of politics by seeking to avoid accountability. Now, I'm not going to go into this article, but here's a guy that I generally agree with. I will go to a quote from his. So this has never been about politics, he said, adding that his organization had worked successfully with the first Trump administration and would do so again if asked. Quote, what it has been about is companies that simply do not want to be held accountable and, because of the influence of big money in Washington, are corrupting the system and trying to bend it to their will. And their will is to be unable to be held accountable. There is no other industry that acts with such arrogance, indifference, and a lack of humility and sociopathic greed at the expense of people. So he has been sanctioned. Like, the good guys are being sanctioned here. I'm sorry, but that is the way it is, in my opinion. Now, you've had so many people, like all these terminally online people, but also American politicians like Mike Lee, the senator from Utah, and other places, really going to town on Europe, saying how horrific Europe is and how we're all censorious. But actually, when you look at all of the metrics, when you look at the Global Peace Index, when you look at the Freedom of Expression Index, when you look at the Journalists Without Borders and their analyses, Europe is ahead. Virtually the entirety of Europe is ahead of the United States on all of these metrics. And yet the audacity to have JD Vance and Marco Rubio and Donald Trump come out and slag Europe off and sanction 5 Europeans for trying to hold big tech to account. Shashank Joshi from The Economist says another step in the dark direction. Quote, a federal judge in New York on Thursday temporarily blocked the Trump administration from detaining a British researcher and legal permanent resident whom it accused of promoting online censoring. So now we've got Imran Ahmed not only being sanctioned, but they tried to detain him. And luckily, a federal judge in New York stopped that from happening. We are involved in a period of political war between the US and its allies. And bloody Kirill Dmitriev and Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, they're freaking cracking a champagne open. 2026, as far as they're concerned, is going to be brilliant. You're going to sit back, eat the popcorn, and watch these allies go to town on each other. Honestly, this is where it's at. This is where it's at the moment. This has huge impact on Ukraine. Because we're supposed to be getting on well together to support Ukraine. But the US at the moment just seems to be wanting to go back to, when I say the US, of course, I mean the Trump administration. It just wants to be siding with Russia, bring about a quick peace, and then allowing big tech to rule the world. Pavel Durov, the French-Russian in charge of Telegram, who was arrested by the French and investigated, he says he's loving this because he thinks Telegram was unfairly looked at. Under Secretary of State Sarah Rogers, who was one that announced all the people being sanctioned. I wonder if it's Sarah Rogers that you saw on that Liz Truss clip, actually. Was she the one? Yeah, I think it was. I think it might have been her then. So obviously, Liz Truss loves a bit of that. Pavel Durov here saying the sanctioned architect of the EU censorship law, that's Thierry Breton, is a close ally and appointee of Macron. Facing ultra-low approval ratings, Macron is trying to silence online critics by turning the entire EU into a digital gulag. I mean, this is so ridiculous. Through censorship, the DSA, Digital Services Act, and mass surveillance, chat control. Mass surveillance is what Palantir has on us all. It's what big tech has on us all. And you want more of that. The EU is trying to stop that. It's trying to work against what you're claiming, Pavel Durov. Anyway, I wouldn't trust you. So we're seeing this war, this political war develop between the US and US administration and the EU. The EU is the world's most democratic region. It's a good time to remind people. It tops global indices, home to top democracies. All members uphold representative democracy. It's directly elected parliament, judicial independence, and a rule of law safeguards. I mean, Europe is not this like downtrodden place full of complete lack of freedom that at the moment is being claimed. As someone says here, Bricktop Nafo says, America, Europe is trying to censor us. Also, America, to enter our country, we want to see 5 years of your social media activity to make sure you haven't said hurty words about us, which is what the US is trying to pass as a bill at the moment, that we have to provide 5 years of social media activity. I think 10 years of email. There's even talk about DNA submission. Because heaven forfend, we might have said something that's critical against the US in the last 5-10 years or whatever. So, yeah, this is a real major clash point at the moment. And, you know, it's really interesting watching what goes on social media. So on the one hand, my social media feed is full of two things. Probably 60% are Americans and bots and trolls and Russians attacking the EU just for being this horrendous shithole place to live. And oh my God, there's no one's got freedom in the EU, and you're just censorious bastards. And then I've got 40% of my feeds are Europeans going, man, it's awesome living in Europe. What are you worrying about? Shut up, America, or shut up, Trump. And you know, you got like all of these like ski So that's a French ski resort, everyone having a jolly good time. And so you've got 40% of people saying, life in Europe's awesome, we're loving it. Hey, check us having parties. And 60% of my feed is like, oh my God, it's horrific in Europe. You must be living in Nazi or Stalinist gulags or whatever. Like this is Austrian, not French. This is a collapsed continent, according to MAGA. Meanwhile, Europe is dancing in ski boots, drinking beer and having a great time. Most of the people yelling about Europe have never been outside Utah. So it's just a weird time at the moment. My feed is just a weird thing. And, you know, lots of people saying stuff like this. X is swamped with Americans claiming Europeans are poor. Zoom out, it's so ridiculous. It's like Elon sitting on a yacht with Bernard Arnault from the EU, where Elon is claiming Bernard is a Euro poor. Meanwhile, the yacht is off the coast of Africa, where everybody is poor. It is the analysis, the analogy this guy says. And then here's a global look at wealth and happiness. So up the y-axis here, you've got happiness scores. So the higher you are, the happier you are. So Finland, you know, Finland and Denmark are often the two at the top of the happiness index. And then to the right is the wealth per adult in dollars, right? And what we have, if where you want to be is top right, rich and happy, right? Essentially. And the USA claiming, oh, Europe's GDP's rubbish and you're not free and you're not, and Europe's going, hang on, we're happier than you, we're wealthier than you on average, and we have much greater trust in institutions. Finland, Denmark, Switzerland, Sweden, Netherlands, Norway, Iceland, Luxembourg, Australia, New Zealand thrown in there, Belgium. Well, okay, so that's going to be, these are richer per capita, UK, France, blah, 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 blah. I mean, it depends how you equate these things, right? How you work them out. Happiness about the same for the UK and USA, but you get the point. You get the point that people are like, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. So anyway, enough of that. But I honestly watch this space. There is just this tendency at the moment to be talking a lot in terms of a political battle between the US and Europe, and we should be allies and we should be working together to make the world a better place. I can't wait for this bloody Trump administration to be gone. I can't wait for it to be gone, honestly. Ben Norton here says the US-backed electoral coup has succeeded in Honduras nearly a month after the election, which featured some of the most blatant fraud I've ever seen. The winner, the scare quotes winner, was declared to be Trump-backed oligarch candidate Nasri Tito Asfura, who is from the notoriously corrupt right-wing National Party, which is run by drug traffickers. Remember, Trump also pardoned the Honduran former president who had been involved in the biggest drug trafficking into the United States in history, and he pardoned him. Asfura pledged that he will break Honduras's ties with China and recognize Taiwan separatists, and he will strongly support the Israeli apartheid regime. Of course, he is an obedient US puppet. This is interesting. Of course, pinch of salt with this person's own baggage and biases. Below, a member of Honduras's National Electoral Council reveals how the other members of the CNE conspired with foreign governments in order to carry out an electoral coup d'etat. The CNE was supposed to carry out a full recount of the votes, but it didn't finish the recount, and instead the other councillors went to a foreign embassy where they reported the US-backed candidate Asfura had won without evidence. The US government openly meddled in Honduras's election. Trump publicly endorsed and campaigned for Asfura and threatened to punish the entire country if he didn't win the election. And this is what happened in Argentina, remember? Trump also pardoned and released from prison the right-wing former dictator of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, and the previous leader of Asfura's National Party, JOH. Hernandez is one of the worst drug traffickers on earth. His close ties allies will now be governing Honduras on behalf of Washington and Wall Street. Below, this CNE official says, quote, the United States and the elites who are allies of organized crime want a president who responds to their interests, and now they have one. So on and so forth. You can go and look into that in more detail. Quite incredible. Right, I'm going to finish off because I've been talking for too long already, but my finishing off is going to be, fairly lengthy, I'm guessing. I'm going to talk a little bit about reform. I was called out the other day by Geordie Gaming Channel, who said, please stop bad-mouthing reform. You should know the words of a member does not reflect the party as a whole. And as you'll remember, I've been a big supporter of Ukraine and been mostly anti-Trump and Musk. I may be running as a councillor for Reform UK in the coming months. And I said, thanks for supporting, I meant to say Ukraine, it's my auto-complete. Be that as it may, there is much more support for Russia statistically in every survey from Reform than any other party. MPs are more compromised, and cheerleaders from Grimes to OPIC are bad-mouthing Ukrainian support or Ukraine support. My position comes from evidence, though I'm sure there are many Reform supporters of Ukraine too. And he says, comments about Reform as a whole, which is not the case for a lot who I speak to. Labour and others are afraid, so they attack any issue or person. It's a clear tactic. I hope Trump is brought down ASAP. Ukraine and the rest of the world need the US with a leader who is not nuts. I hope future comments will be directed at people rather than the party as a whole. So this is an interesting conversation. And I like a comment like this, which is, dude, I disagree with you. Like, stop talking about reform as a whole when these are just a few bad apples or they're not fully representative. Now, the question is, at what point in a generalization does a generalization not work? And because either you have generalizations or you don't. And we cannot have decent, reasonable arguments without generalizations. This is really important. I've had this discussion previously in many different contexts. That if you're saying, look, you know, not all reform people are like that, so you can't say reform are like this, and you're like, okay, that's a fair point, but not all of any group of anything you talk about are generally 100% those people believing the same thing, right? We generalize all the time, and we have to generalize, because if we don't generalize, we have to talk in specifics. And you can't talk about the United States being like this, Europe being like that, France being like this, or people from this city being more like that. You have to say, well, I'm just going to go through the 2 million people who live here, and I'm going to name every single one of these 2 million people, and I'm going to tell you what their exact beliefs are. And then by the time I've done all that, I'll be another 10 years older, and then I'll begin to be able to make my point. So we necessarily have to talk in generalizations, right? And it goes as an unsaid thing that we understand that I'm generalizing and I'm not referring to all people. But the interesting thing about reform is that they are far more, Reform UK party members or supporters, and maybe MPs and councillors, are far more likely to be supportive of Russia than Ukraine, than in any other party. But it's still not a majority. So is it fair to talk about reform in a particular way? And I would say, well, actually, yes, it still is, as long as we're careful about the language I use. And I should be more careful with the language I use. I admit this. If I've fallen short this by saying that, but I have done this a number of times because I've referred to the data. I often say reform supporters are more likely to be supportive of, because I've done a whole segment on this previously, and I do so much talking that sometimes I may slip up. But the point is that I've got some receipts, at least, to defend my position. So here's a YouGov survey from just this November, the end of November. So this is a month ago exactly. Reform UK are the only party that Britons are more likely to see as pro-Russia than anti-Russia. So from what you have seen and heard is the question. This is the survey question. Do you think the following parties are generally pro-Russia, anti-Russia, or neither pro nor anti-Russia? So Reform UK, 28% pro-Russia, 15% neither, 13% anti-Russia, 42% don't know. You have more support for Russia than for anti-Russia. Conservatives are the next highest with 11%. Labour on 10%. So 1 in 10 Labour supporters pro-Russia, but actually Labour, interestingly, have the most anti-Russia as well, with 39% anti-Russia. Greens down at 5% pro-Russia, Lib Dems 4% pro-Russia. But yeah, interesting that Labour have the highest anti-Russia, and then Conservatives next with the highest anti-Russia, but then also the second highest pro-Russia. So, you know, there's some schizophrenia going on here. Okay, so that's an interesting data point. This is one that I previously talked to you about because when it came out, I found this fascinating. This is from February this year. So that data that you just looked at is far more recent. This is going back sort of 8 months, 9 months, whatever it is. So British public opinion on Vladimir Putin, Volodymyr Zelensky, and Donald Trump. Do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of the following? Vladimir Putin, right? You've got all Britons at 4% find him favorable. Labour voters, 2% favorable of Vladimir Putin. Lib Dem, 2%. Conservative, 3%. Reform voters, 12%. So the point here is that looking at Labour, the ruling party at the moment, and you ask Labour supporters around the UK, do you have a favourable view of Putin? Only 2 out of 100 say yes. 12 out of 100, over 1 in 10 Reform voters think that Vladimir Putin is okay. So here you've got a problem, right? Which is, yeah, it's not the majority of Reform voters, but it's 6 times as many as Labour voters are supportive of Vladimir Putin. Now, if I don't pick up on that and have some kind of generalized statement to say that Reform voters are much more likely to be supportive of Russia than Ukraine, or more supportive of Russia than any other party, I'd be missing out on a really important data point here. Zelensky, Britain's 64% favourable, Labour 75, Lib Dems 83, Conservatives 77. Reform dropped to below 50% support for Zelensky, 49%. That is very significant. with 37% saying unfavorable, which is, 3 times higher than the next, over 3 times higher than the Tories in terms of unfavorable. And then Donald Trump, we have 8% of Labour voters favourable of Trump, 7% of Lib Dems, 28% of Tories, of Conservatives. So there's that right-wing conservatism that seems to be supportive of the MAGA kind of side of things. And then 66% of Donald Trump, of Reform voters supportive of Donald Trump. So if we go back to your man here, please stop bad-mouthing, Reform. I don't like Trump and I don't like Putin. And good on you, mate. And there needs to be more of you in Reform. But at the moment, Reform have a statistically very significant number of people who are both supportive of Putin and supportive of Trump that I find problematic. Reform UK is our answer to MAGA, right? And you can see that in their support of Trump, and you can see that in their support of Putin. And the stats back this up. So while I take on board maybe a need for me to have more nuance and to be careful when I say these things, and I'd have to go back and listen to myself speak, but I'm usually fairly careful in the words I choose, but I say so many things that sometimes I can slip up. But I'm not having a go at you, but I will have a go at Reform, because Nigel Farage, your leader, spent, how many years waxing lyrical about NATO expansionism? He said everything that Nathan Gill said, and Nathan Gill's gone to prison for 10.5 years. Nigel Farage said it, and the question is, did he take money from Russia? Because if he didn't, then he said it for free. So your party leader appears to be compromised by Russia. The supporters seem to be more likely than the national average to be supportive of Russia and less supportive of Ukraine. And I find this very, very concerning. So good luck to you, because actually, I would like people from within Reform to shout from the rafters about supporting Ukraine. That definitely needs to happen. So, I would advocate you running for councillor big time, putting Ukraine support on the agenda for Reform people. Because at the moment we're seeing, I think, Russian disinformation really get into the places where Reform voters hang out, like Twitter, in spaces where there's anti-immigration and this and that and all of the many of the elements that really float Reform voters' boats, not small boats, big boats. And that is a place where you're going to see then slipped in under that anti-Ukraine rhetoric coming from Russian bots and trolls. So anyway, I just thought that was an important conversation to be having there. Right, I'm going to go back to you guys to just deal with some of your live stream comments and whatnot. And I see if I do have time to talk about anything else, but we've probably got some questions from you guys, from super chats and whatnot. Thank you very much, Johnny Nedregard, you total legend, and another Norwegian friend, the pirate stupid. Super chat won't let me post long posts. Sorry about that, but thank you very much for your support. The Weasel gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Welcome back. I haven't seen you for some time. Thank you very much, Weasel. And Lag Monster as well, likewise, gifted 10 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Super kind. Kevin Force, 10 ATP Geopolitics memberships. This is super, super generous of all of you, by the way. And Michael Vuchar with 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thank you, my Canadian friend. Lag Monster saying, I love Kevin and Michael Vuchar. They're so supportive indeed. They are. Right. Okay. Actually, yes. So Johnny Nevergard then asked, energy attacks continues. Yes. So I was going to talk about possibly some of these things going on in Ukraine at the moment. Ukraine's energy infrastructure was massively, massively hit overnight. We had combined heat and power plants hit and hydroelectric power plants. I think Ukraine are in a lot of trouble, and these strikes on the energy infrastructure, I've told you before, I think it's one of Ukraine's biggest weaknesses. And this is a pressure cooker moment for Ukraine. They have the weakness of the energy infrastructure and personnel. And at the moment, Russia is really hitting the former, whilst having an effect on the latter. Underground energy wells drilled using off-the-shelf oil industry gear is the only Putin-proof energy source. It's not rare, not inaccessible, and neither is steam turbines. Well, sounds like a good option to me. I think they need to be thinking about very safe energy production indeed. Papa Dutch, good to have you on board, mate. NATO doesn't expand, it accepts new applicants. This is a really good point. I didn't make it earlier, but absolutely. And actually, they're very careful about accepting new applicants. They don't accept anyone in, and they didn't even want Ukraine for all the time period we were talking about. So yeah, you're absolutely right. What Putin fears is that Russia is shrinking like a pile of excrement in the sun. Very well said. The Pirates gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thanks again, matey. Really appreciate that. And here we have Ida saying, "Hi, I love your channel and I really appreciate the support you show for Ukraine." Slava Ukraini. I will be traveling around the UK and Ireland, and I thought it would be nice to stop by and say hello to you if I'm in the area. The best thing to do, although I'm not on Discord much, is to reach out to me with a private message on Discord. So join the Discord server. It's all about OPSEC, and I don't want to be giving out my details and also say, hey, I live here, and then suddenly the FSB is hunting me down. But absolutely, yes. So hit me up privately, and that'd be fab. But thank you, Ida, for your support. Really appreciate that. The Pirate says, a pint for you to have with Ida if you meet up. Thank you very much, Pirate. I will, yeah, it will be on me, that's for sure. Jiri Kraus, sad day to be Czech again. Yeah, I really feel bad. That's probably the wrong phrase. I'm really worried about continued Czech support, governmental support for Ukraine, and the present coalition government is bad news. Is really bad news if you're just thinking about sort of European unity and support for Ukraine. Yeah, it's just not cool. Lag Monster again, just wanted to say you are the worst because I got money for Xmas and I donated it all to car for Ukraine because in my opinion you're the best. That is so very generous. I'm going to do a car for Ukraine. In fact, let's do that now. So please remember to pop along to atpgeo.com/donate and you will get to the car for Ukraine fundraising page. Wow, we're above 7,000 spondoolies. This is absolutely amazing. We're almost at our 11,000 mark. That is really, really generous. I need to get my own donation into that as well. By the way, I must do that. Campaigns, if we go to the Christmas tree trucks, I mean, look at how well it's doing. We are now in 5th place, which is absolutely phenomenal. It'd be amazing if we could overtake Sukhamimus. Silicon Curtain's gone beyond what our goal was going to be. Where I only put down 1 truck for this because we were already doing. We started this late because we were doing the Jiggers Poor campaign fundraiser. So that's really cool. But thank you for reminding me about that. The Pirates, very cool of you to support. Thank you. The Pirate then says, wish they would put JD on a no speak list. Yes, like you want censorship, JD. You worried about it? Well, I'd slap some gaffer tape across your face. Who's popping? This is what doom scrolling X produces. Yeah, I am such a victim to this. Who's popping? Like, honestly, it is just, yeah, as much as I hate Twitter, I get sucked in and then I'm full of rage half the time, and then the other half the time I'm like, oh, thank God there are still some decent human beings out there, and then I go back to being full of rage. Neil's comment, Jeff Landry, BS, and more BS about Greenland. Yes, absolutely, 100% Niels. And thank you for your ATP Geopolitics membership gifts. That's really, really kind. And Lag Monster as well. Goodness me, everyone's being super generous. This is what happens when I go away for too long. Everyone's like, oh, I doubt anyone say you miss me, but it's nice hanging out, and I've missed. Do you know, I've genuinely missed this. I genuinely get enjoyment out of this. For all sorts of, you know, weird reasons, like I've talked to you before about, like feeling like you matter and stuff like that, but also just like I genuinely enjoy talking about stuff I find really important and interesting. And it's amazing that you guys also find what I have to say interesting and important. So that's just a minor miracle in itself. And then you would choose to hang out with me and do that. And it's just a lovely community of you wonderful people. It's just an enjoyable thing to do. So thank you for allowing me that. and for being so awesome. Thanks, Lag Monster. The Pirate, please hit like and subscribe. That is free, and that is a good point. Thank you for mentioning that. Who's popping? Beware of historical revisionism and sane-washing deeply fascist ideas and people promoted by privately owned social media platforms that mold it. That one sentence there is as good a that's as good a New Year's resolution as you will get. Beware, this year I'm going to be beware of historical revisionism and same-washing deeply fascist ideas and people promoted by privately owned social media platforms that mold it. Daryl Kirsten, sorry. So long from hearing from you. Hey, Daryl, I hope you're well. You're on top of things today, pal. Best wishes to you and yours. Thank you. I don't know whether I am on top of things. I've done a lot of eating and drinking. Honestly, like just a little bit too much. So I've been on a tea here today. But yeah, it has been a very feastful Christmas. Wizard of Ooze, and thank you, Daryl. That's really generous of you, by the way. Big Tech see Americans, says Wizard of Ooze, online. Big Tech sees Americans online. Big Tech see Americans online start to realize that Europeans live far better lives. The same fear Putin has of Russians seeing Ukraine do well. I think there's an interesting idea there. Like part of what Russia didn't want is part of what Putin didn't want is Russians looking over the fence and seeing people in Ukraine having a better, medium wage or whatever, a better quality of life, standard of life, and all that kind of stuff, and begin to get a little bit jealous, and then that causes discontent. So I think that's something that underwrites Putin's approach. Thank you, Wizard. Julian Rossiter, good to have you on board, mate. Gifted 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. We're almost there, guys. You've been super generous. Rick from the Netherlands, long time no speak. One day Magalan will be a surreal comedy nobody believes wants to be even close to be reality. I do wonder what historians will think in 100 years' time. It'd be interesting to see what the opinion will be looking back on these days. How much money does the US lose from less tourism? It has been equated. If you just Google that, it will be there. I mean, AI these days, say of it what you will, it can give you some pretty good answers fairly quickly when you need them. But yeah, it has lost. Last time I looked, it was 30 billion earlier this year. So it's a fairly considerable amount of moolah. Zeb Carter gifted 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Hey Zeb, good to have you on board. And Rick again, pro-Russia or not in favor of supporting Ukraine? Yeah, there is a slight difference as well there. That's a really good point, by the way. Those are two separate things. You can not be pro-Russia. You can be not pro-Russia, but also not in favor of supporting Ukraine. They aren't necessarily one-for-one linked. Stephen, happy Yuletide to everyone. Slava Ukraini. Hey, Stephen. Good to have you on board. Right. So that was that. So back to where are we? What are we doing for time? I've been speaking way too long. Whoa. Okay. Just a few other bits and pieces then that I was going to share with you. This is like these are the DVD extras. Does anyone still watch DVDs? Let's have some DVD extras on a bit of craziness going on politically, shall we? Let's go to Donald Trump Jr. I thought this was a really fascinating insight.
Midterms are coming around the corner, and make no mistake, the Democrat Party wants to do whatever they possibly can to shut this movement down. Not just the Democrats, the rhinos. You see the manufactured attacks on JD.
Rhinos are Republicans in name only. In other words, it's a no true Scotsman fallacy where you're like, well, you're not a real Republican if you are going to be critical of Donald Trump. You can't be a real Republican. So therefore, you're a rhino. You're a Republican in name only.
Attacks on JD, myself, my father, anyone who understands that this isn't the Republican Party anymore. It's the America First Party. It's the Make America Great Again Party. And we are not going back.
So for any of my Republican friends watching this who are Republican but wondering, where they stand at the moment with regard to their own political party, you've got Donald Trump literally telling you that it's no longer the Republican Party, it's the America First, it's the MAGA Party, and we're not going back. And if you criticize JD Vance, Donald Trump, or me, that's what he said, then you are a rhino. You are not a true Republican. A true Republican cannot criticize Trump Sr., Trump Jr., or JD Vance. The Republican Party has died. It is now the MAGA Party. What do you do if you're a true sort of conservative Republican of old? I don't know. I don't know. Vote independent or support the Democrats until the Republican Party sort of reinvents itself. Here we've got Jesse Waters. I mean, he goes on for quite a long time. This is 4 minutes 45, but he reveals what President Trump told him about the new White House ballroom plans. I said, Mr. President, the ballroom is like 4 times the size of the White House. And he said, Jesse, it's a monument. I'm building a monument to myself because no one else will. Wow. So if that doesn't tell you about what Trump is doing these days, nothing else will. I mean, Trump is becoming the dictator we always worried he would become, and he's doing it much more quickly, and he's doing it much more ostentatiously. Hey, I'm building a monument to myself. The ballroom that's going to be 3 times as big as the White House, that's replacing the East Wing, that is a monument to myself. New York Times has confirmed the following previously unreported donations and pledges to the White House ballroom. Miriam Edelson's foundation. So she's that Jewish casino magnate that is really in support of Trump, and arguably why Trump's position with regard to Israel is like it is. I mean, she is pumped. What is it, $400 million over time, more than that now, into Trump and the Republican Party. Lockheed Martin, $10 million. Palantir, $10 million. That's Peter Thiel. Ripple, $5 million. Parsons, $2.5 million. Roblox CEO, $2.5 million, and more and more. Vlad Tenev, $2 million. Tim Cook from Apple, $1 million. Sam Altman, $1 million. We knew about all of them. Isabella Herrera donated $2.5 million to MAGA Inc. On the 31st of December 2024. At the time, her father, a Venezuelan-Italian banker, was being prosecuted for bribery. In July, Trump's DOJ authorized a misdemeanor plea deal overruling career prosecutors who had pushed for a harsher sentence. There's a new report out, or new analysis out at the moment, saying essentially that Trump is offering to pardon people for like $1 million. Like you can go and have a meal with him and blah blah blah. It's just like pardons for money. Scoop 3, in January, Oakview Group, then controlled by Tim Lewicki, donated $250,000 to Trump's inaugural. In July, Lewicki was charged with a bid rigging case. He could have testified in the Live Nation case, but this month, before the case went to trial, he was pardoned by Trump. Just, corruption. Ballroom. We're $40 trillion in debts. Why are we building ballrooms? This is a renovated palm room. Look how wonderful that is. Isn't that lovely? Meanwhile, I want to take SNAP payments to poor people who can't afford food. And I want to take old people off Medicare. And I want to defund Medicaid. Oh, by the way, nice spanking nice new palm room covered in marble. How nice is that? Lush, innit? Yeah. Unbelievable. Now, President Trump, potential marble armrests for seating at the Trump Kennedy Center, unlike anything ever done or seen before. So he's now put his name on the Kennedy Center. It's now the Trump Kennedy Center. And he's turning the seat, he's putting marble on the seats there. By the way, what was it, a jazz concert pulled out, jazz group pulled out on Christmas Eve, and Trump's Russell Waters is chasing him for $1 million. How dare you pull it? They pulled out because they didn't like that put the Trump name on it. And now Russell Ford is trying to sue them for $1 million. Trump's top priorities in America: a ballroom for himself, marble armrests in the Trump Kennedy Center, a new plane for himself. We're going to come on to that in a second. Putting his name on things. Great job, America. That's what he says. He's putting his name on stuff. Donald Trump has found another way to waste taxpayer money. Trump wants to paint all executive fleet VIP transport aircraft with his inane America First logo. A new livery on an aircraft costs between $50 million and 300 million, with at least 100 planes in the VIP fleets. Trump's vanity project, maybe 50 and 300,000, sorry, with at least 100 planes in the VIP fleet. Trump's vanity project will cost us at least 10 million in total to make the entire government fleet of aircraft flying billboards touting the failure of America First and the Trump regime. Call your members of Congress and say no to Donald Trump's latest ridiculous idea to waste our hard-earned tax money. And that's what he does. He just goes around and paints things in new colors and puts his name on things. Talking about putting his name on things, he said that the US will build 2 Trump-class battleships, describing them as the largest and most powerful ever built. Of course, that's how he describes them.
As Commander-in-Chief, it's my great honor to announce that I have approved a plan for the Navy to begin the construction of 2 brand new, very large, the largest we've ever built, battleships. You know, you used to build the Iowa, the Missouri, the Wisconsin, the Alabama, many others. We had big battleships. These are bigger, but they will have 100 times they'll be 100 times the force, the power, and there's never been anything like these ships. These have been under.
I mean, can you trust anything? It's going to be there'll be 100 times the force and power. Will they though? Will they really? Like, is that an actual? Have you pulled that number out of your ass? Now, honestly, Donald, tell me, have you pulled that number out of your ass?
Design consideration for a long time, and it started with me in my first term, because I said, why aren't we doing battleships like we used to? And
because he's a master military strategist. So, of course, he knows exactly what the right things to build are. You know what we used to build? Really big battleships. Can we build them 100 times more powerful? Yeah, but we don't need that anymore. The war has changed. What we need is stuff, you know, we're talking about satellite space warfare to do with it. Yeah, but can we build battleships 100 times bigger, call them the Golden Fleet and name them after Trump? Can we do that? Yeah, but no, sorry, Mr. President, but I just have to say that we've looked at the defense strategy and actually our needs at the moment. No, yeah, but can we build bloody great battleships with my name on? Can we do that? Please, can we do that? And if you say no, I will sack you. Like the guy that said I couldn't build a ballroom the size of Uranus on instead of the East Wing. Yeah, I'll sack you.
these are the best in the world. They'll be the fastest, the biggest, and by far 100 times more powerful than any battleship ever built. So if you look at the Iowa, the Missouri, Wisconsin, Alabama, and others, but they were similar in size, some a little bit bigger than the others. But if you take the biggest one, it's 100 times more powerful. They're longer by a little bit, but and they're bigger ships, but they hold much more. They use the word lethality. Battleships are the largest, sturdiest, and most heavily armed vessel.
Oh my God, shut up. Just shut up. Anyway, yeah, this is
The
him.
U.S. Navy will lead the design of these ships along with me because I'm a very aesthetic person.
Just listen to what he said. Like, this is, I'm sorry, Americans, this is who you've got in charge of your country. I'm going to be helping design the battleships because I'm an aesthetic person. Because there's nothing that says that's a powerful, most lethal ship on Earth. Nothing says it more than how nice it looks. You know, because it's got marble armrests on it, like someone said. Are you serious? This guy's such a tit.
The U.S. Navy will lead the design of these ships along with me because I'm a very aesthetic person, alongside our partners in American industry. And we're going to have Pete Hegseth and Marco and a lot of very talented people involved. But
why? Why are you going to get Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio? What's the Secretary of State got to do with the design of a battleship? What's Pete Hegseth going to do apart from drink too much and barf over the plans? Jesus wept. What is wrong with you lot? Trump, you're such a gargantuan twat. How are we here? What? Why? How have we arrived in this time frame where the president of the United States is banging on about how bloody ascetic he is and how he's going to be involved in making ships 100 times more powerful than they used to be. Because I'm great with ascetics. Have you not seen the bloody gold all over the Oval Office? That's me. Put me in charge of a battleship. Oh, man, it's going to be this golden ship, golden fleece floating through the oceans. Jesus. The 6 richest men in the world are all Trump allies. They control your algorithms and data on X, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, Threads, and YouTube. Just in case you're wondering why more isn't done to stop right-wing bots and misinformation on social media, that's your answer. There you go. Larry Ellison, Mark Zuckerberg, Sergey Brin, Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, Elon Musk. I need a stiff drink after this. Donald Trump Jr. just is a paid strategic advisor for Kalshi, one of these betting things. If you watch South Park, they did a great episode in this present series on the one that's just being done on Kalshi, on the betting markets. But he's a paid strategic advisor for Kalshi, Donald Trump Jr., where they are setting odds so people can bet on the decisions made by his father. It's just an all-time grift. It's a constant grift. Grift, grift, grift. Will Trump do this? Will Trump do that? Bet, 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 bet. Oh, by the way, the guy on our board of directors or a paid strategic advisor is Donald Trump Jr. Remember when the Republicans lost their effing minds after Hunter Biden sold his paintings for an average of $54,000 each? But after Don Jr.'s fledgling startup scored a $620 million loan from the Pentagon, the silence is deafening. This is freaking corruption, and those people that shouted the loudest about Hunter Biden aren't saying a freaking thing. If anyone of the 512 people presently watching this right now, if any of you shouted about Hunter Biden, if any of you shouted about shout your criticism about Hunter Biden, just search back in your memory, was that you? Honestly, did you shout about Hunter Biden being absolute, corruption and terrible and X, Y, and Z? I really hope that each and every one of you that shouted about Hunter Biden is in proportion to what is going on in the present administration, shouting proportionately louder. I hope you are going nuts about what is happening, about Jared Kushner making deals to the tune of billions, not a painting worth 54,000. Even that stuff with Burisma is a freaking child's play. The amount of money these gimps are making. Talking about Jared Kushner. Shocking. Jared Kushner's firm just ditched a $500 million luxury hotel project in Serbia. You know, the one that they had to slag off NATO and build a statue against NATO in order to get it built in Serbia? Yeah, that's who Jared Kushner is. In Serbia, following a major bribery probe involving government officials. Oh, he's pulled out, is he? Bribery investigation. Jared Kushner abandons the Serbia hotel project just hours after 4 government officials were indicted in a bribery investigation. Was that anything to do with you, Jared? Were you anything to do with that? Only because, you're part of the American government at the moment and you're negotiating the future of Ukraine and you're probably taking backhanders in Serbia, you corrupt plank. Axios has learned that the White House has begun managing the Department of Justice's account on Twitter to respond to posts highlighting mentions of Trump and the Epstein files. Do you know that separation where the DOJ is supposed to be independent and where Pam Bondi was asked whether she would be separate and blah, blah, blah. She's actually talked about how her job as Attorney General is to defend Donald Trump. That's not your job, actually. That's what you'll do if you're part of this cult of personality, where you can't separate the powers. Anyway, the DOJ apparently now is just part of the White House. And the White House is managing their messaging on Twitter. In typical administrations, there's a wall between the White House and what is supposed to be an independent Justice Department. Not in this one, because it's all bloody corrupt. And then let's get to good old Pete Hegseth, our good old Christian nationalist friend. They held a church sermon in the Pentagon.
Is love strong enough? John chapter 1. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. Born in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. The greatest story ever told. And the best part about it is it's a true story.
I know every single day you face unthinkable and maybe even seemingly impossible obstacles as you protect the freedoms that we enjoy. And I just want to know that there are so many people lifting you up in prayer and committing to pray for each and every.
Anyway, that seems rather inappropriate for the Pentagon, but just right up there on the press stand, they're having an actual sermon. Now, I know I have very many committed Christians that follow this channel, and thank you for doing so. I'm not using this as a platform for my atheistic beliefs. That's my other channel, A Tippling Philosopher. But I have written a book on this, by the way. It's called The Nativity: A Critical Examination, and it looks at the historical basis for the nativity story, or the lack of historical basis. I've done that same with the resurrection, called The Resurrection: A Critical Examination of the Easter Story. And I'm just at the moment, although it's a co-written book with Dr. Aaron Adair, and I'm just editing what is at the moment running at 450 pages, a book on the Exodus, where we've done the same to the Exodus, really looking into exegetical, biblical exegesis, and archaeology and philosophy and theology. We're doing that with the Exodus, a critical examination of the Moses story. So anyway, this is the first in that trilogy of books. It's a nativity one, and it's a much shortest one. Go and check that out. I should have said that before Christmas. But I'd just like to sit down with Pete Hegseth and talk about the historicity of Luke and Matthew's accounts, and see if he would still say it was as historically accurate after that discussion. Anyway, that's enough for me. You didn't want to hear that. That's what I used to talk about. I now talk about geopolitics almost entirely. Anyway, I really appreciate all of your support for the channel. Thank you very much indeed. My goodness, some of you have still been very generous thereafter. So Just Not Good says the saying, "He that is not on my side is against me. Do not support Ukraine and therefore support the Soviets." It is what he wants. Yeah, that's good point. Well made. Thank you for the support. Ivan Gilbert. Sorry, Ivan. I'm so used to being Russian, not being Russian, talking about Russian stuff. Ivan Gilbert, thank you for your super sticker. Really appreciate that. Chris R. JP, please get a few of us together in the Red Lion for a post-New Year pint and pie. Would be good. Drag Doris out as well. If you are a local, Chris, then the Red Line, is that the one in Fareham? The Red Line there. Is that your local? Hit me up on Discord. Thanks, Chris. Rick from the Netherlands. They stopped building battleships since World War II for a reason. Yeah, indeed. But now the reason is that Trump's good at aesthetics and he wants to build the biggest one ever. Biggest, best one. Biggest, best. It's marginally longer, but it's bigger. It's bigger. It's better. 100 times more powerful. Yeah. Wizard of Ooze, ballroom, really a data center theory is compelling. Wonder, yeah, it probably is just a big power bank for AI. That's all it is. You go in, we're going to have a ball, you open it up and it's just like steaming turbines of, I don't know, whatever. Papa Dutch, largest and most powerful artificial reefs. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you guys. Really appreciate that. Look, take care. I've been banging on for too long. Thank you very much. Now, by the way, do you think Erica Kirk arranged to have her hubby bumped off? I've got a whole tab group on Erica Kirk that I haven't shared with you because I've been going on for too long, but I have got a tab group on Erica Kirk, not so much about theories like that, but just the fact that she is all over the place, very glammed up, laughing and smiling the whole time. I've never seen someone take advantage of another half's death quite as much as she is at the moment. It sounds awful to say that, and should I be criticizing her for that? I don't know. It just seems rather. If I was Charlie Kirk's family, I think I'd feel pretty weird about Erica Kirk, and what she's doing at the moment is really, really overt. Anyway, that's enough from me. Take care, guys. I really appreciate your support. Please don't forget atpgeo.com/donate. and atpgeo.com/UK petition to help out with Mark from the Little Whiskey Shop, his petition. See you soon. It's been a pleasure. I normally say when I see my mates, I'm like, thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure. Pleasure was all yours. As a joke, it wasn't mine. It wasn't my pleasure hanging out with you. But actually, it really was my pleasure. So take care, everybody. Toodle pips.